40 protesters were able to storm the Mansion House in the city for this regular formal dinner where everyone's in their black tie. And they were able to disrupt it with lots of women dressed in long red dresses with sashes saying climate emergency on. Some of those tried to rush forward towards, after quite some minutes, towards the stage where Philip Hammond was speaking. And a female activist was grabbed by the Foreign Office Minister, Mark Field. Now, Greenpeace say that he actually assaulted the female activist. He says he reacted instinctively as an ex-military man, although he has referred himself to the Cabinet Office for an investigation of whether or not he breached the ministerial code. Now, the woman was running past him. There's one video in which he just turns and grabs her. The longer video shows her running towards him, or past him, where he was sitting, towards where Philip Hammond was speaking. He turns round, he grabs her hands, one of which had a mobile phone in. How is anyone to know whether it's a mobile phone or anything else? And then he pushes her against a pillar, and then holding her arms and holding her neck, he then frog marches her out of the room. Now, he's been accused of heavy-handedness. I wonder, though, if she had been a man, whether people would be so concerned. Apparently, this is all about how he treats a female activist. But hey, if we want equality, don't the same rules apply? And what if he, Mark Field, had been a woman? What if this had been, I don't know, Penny Mordaunt, or a Labour shadow minister, someone like Emily Thornberry, grabbing a protester? Don't we often say that actually it's when good people do nothing that bad things happen? Now, is it such a bad thing that climate change protesters have entered a black tie dinner? Well, the reason is we can't make a judgment on that is we don't know, because no one has any idea at any point now what protesters for anything will now do. One day we're just stopping people going about their business in Oxford Circus, or going about their business all over Waterloo Bridge. Some days, though, they carry weapons, they carry knives, they carry guns, they throw milkshakes, and we just don't know anymore. I, for one, think that, yes, he was probably a little bit heavy-handed given where he was, and there should have been security to deal with it. But as a general rule, I'm getting a bit fed up of the idea that anyone, at any time, because they feel strongly about a cause, can disrupt anything else that anyone else is doing. Bit worried also about the security we've got for our senior politicians and people in the city and everyone else. If 40 climate change protesters are able to enter somewhere that should have been totally secure last night, I have a funny feeling that with these protesters, if they'd also been protesting against something or for something which perhaps is seen as a little less fluffy, and I, for one, don't think that climate change protesters are fluffy and nice people at all. I think there's actually a very sinister agenda behind them. If it was, though, for something like, something awful, like Brexit, I think those on the left right now who are virtual signalling by saying how terrible this was would feel very, very differently about it. So is it one rule for one and one rule for the other? I have a funny feeling that as these protests continue, more and more people get disrupted and get fed up with this agenda being foisted on us by force, to all intents and purposes, which is what these protests are really. Actually, how Mark Field handled that protester is how we're all going to want to handle those protesters in the future. And I'm not entirely sure that's a good thing for anyone. Lord Matt Ridley is on the line. He's a Times columnist and Tory peer and has been writing about these issues of climate change for many years. Good morning to you, Lord Ridley.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. What did you make of both A, the protest, and B, how Mark Field, the Foreign Office Minister, who manhandled a female activist out of the room and is now facing talk of being not just arrested but even losing his job as well? What did you make of that?
Well, of course, I wasn't there and I can't know exactly what was happening. From the video I've seen, I think it's possible to imagine that he did feel under threat because she was carrying something in her hand. It was actually probably a mobile phone, but how did he know? MPs have been murdered in recent years, and they have to face extremists all the time. So one can't know whether or not his explanation that he was acting on impulse is fair or not. But it will have to see from others who are closer to the scene. But I think the problem is, of course, that it's given this stunt far more publicity than it would otherwise have got. And that's exactly the purpose of the stunt, was to get publicity. Remember, Greenpeace is a publicity machine. That is to say, it's a big multinational business raking in hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And unlike other companies, it doesn't have to spend that hundreds of millions of dollars on doing useful things like producing clean energy or researching clean energy even. All it does is do protests that get more publicity that bring more money. That's its business
a lot
model.
of people will be wondering about why there would be a protest which has come after a Commons vote to vote for net zero emissions by 2050. And of course, the climate change people of the Extinction Rebellion want net zero emissions by 2025, which no one remotely sane thinks is achievable, other than us all going back to live in caves. But 2050 apparently is achievable, but by a huge personal and national cost to our economy, many would argue. But the fact that the Prime Minister has just committed the government to this, it does make you wonder whether whatever the government offers of any political hue is ever going to be enough. Are they always going to want more?
I think that is the problem in this area, that a number of people in the Conservative Party and the government think that you can buy off extreme environmentalists by offering them pretty extreme targets. And 2050 net zero is extreme. There's no way we can get there with renewable energy. And the only other way is a hair shirt economy where we all give up flying and going on holidays, which makes no sense. Because, people aren't going to vote for that for a start, see what happens in Australia and France.
Do people get an option to vote for it? If every single major political party signs up to this stuff, then we don't get to have a say and say to our political masters, actually, you know what, we've looked at the economic costs on this and we're not sure we are happy about it.
Yeah, exactly. And frankly, if you want any kind of transport system at all, remember, electricity is only 20% of energy, so we've got to decarbonise transport as well as heat, as well as everything else. And if we want any kind of reasonable economy, then we've got to continue using fossil fuel, because nuclear isn't coming to our rescue fast enough either.
But also the people who oppose the carbon emissions from oil and from gas and coal don't seem to like nuclear either.
But I think back to your original point that you can't buy these protesters off. In fact, you only fan the flames. Notice they're not protesting in China. Who was it who said the trouble with paying the Dane Guild is you never get rid of the Dane. You bribe someone to go away and they come back even stronger. And I'm afraid that the more this government leans towards appeasing this extremist campaign, the more they will get the wind in their sails and mount protests like this. In
terms of what Mark Field did last night, I'm sure you've seen the video. I don't want anyone at 8 o'clock in the morning saying they haven't seen that video yet. It's all over the news. It's all over our Twitter feed as well. Do you think that Mark Field should be forced to resign from his job at the Foreign Office? Should he face arrest?
He shouldn't. He should be praised. And the serious side of this is that MPs and ministers are under threat. My wife and I don't normally talk about it. When she was a minister, she was violently assaulted by a woman. So the idea you can only be assaulted by a man, women don't do any of these assaults, is wrong. If you take serious assaults, Joe Cox, Robert Bradford, assassinated in his constituency office, the Liberal MP's caseworker, these are serious things. Next thing, if a personal protection officer for the Chancellor had intervened, blocked this woman's progress, reversed it, no one would have criticised him. In fact, I suspect there's television coverage of other protesters being stopped and taken out. Let's see those on television as well. And additionally, let's look at that interview at BBC in 1988 when someone came into a studio. One of the presenters, was it Nicholas Witchell, manhandled the person to the ground and the programme wasn't interrupted. I invited the BBC to show that. They haven't. I invite other broadcasters to show what happened to other protesters last night. And then we'll have Mark Field in context. I think what he did would be regarded as common sense and sensible and proportionate by virtually everyone who's seen it.
I have to say, this does seem to be, and although on Twitter not borne out, very much in terms of the responses we're getting today, very much borne out. Calls for Mark Field not just to resign or be sacked from his job as a Foreign Office Minister, also to face prosecution. Why?
Well, that's a common assault against a woman, and it's unbelievable that he did it in front of so many people. What's even more shocking, Julia, actually, is that all of those parliamentarians sat and watched that happen and did nothing and then applauded afterwards. This is a woman being violently assaulted in front of everybody. It's not just simply lightly manhandling her and gently flog-marching her out. It was really shocking how quickly he became very violent. The fact was that those Greenpeace activists had been there quite a while, so it's very clear that she was a Greenpeace activist. There was no way whatsoever that anyone could be under the idea that it was someone who was someone carrying a knife or someone who was violently dangerous. It was clearly a protester. So that kind of reaction is just unforgivable.
Okay.
To say that he's ex-military is even more worrying, really, because if you're ex-military, you should be able to be under control, shouldn't you?
OK, well, let's bring Elena Banbury, and you're a Conservative activist. Eleanor, you've seen the video. What did you think about what Mark Field did?
Yeah, sorry, his comments have just baffled me a bit. He said they were stood there a while, so it was very clear she wasn't carrying a knife. If you've been stood there for a while, does that mean you instantly gain like X-ray vision? How on earth do you know that she didn't have something in her bag, on her leg, or just was going to kill someone with her bare hands?
You're saying, wait a minute, you're saying, Eleanor, that you think that Mark Field thought that she was a physical threat, and that's why he reacted as he did?
Of course, yeah. Everyone keeps saying this woman was not a threat, and I think that's a massive point. That if it had been a large, tall man, then potentially people would have been treating it differently on social media.
Is it the fact that it was a man? It was a man confronting a woman. You're saying that if for instance, if it had been, say, Emily Thornberry or Penny Mordaunt, different political parties, as a woman confronting a female activist, that would have been a very different matter.
Completely, yeah. I genuinely think it's because it's a white male who has restrained a reasonably sized female, nothing too threatening to look at, but you can never assume because that's how lives are lost.
Jamie, I mean, Eleanor makes a very good point that actually, just because we're uncomfortable about seeing a man grabbing a woman, absolutely, but is it not irrelevant that it was a woman? And actually, it's reasonable at that point to assume that, OK, we've had a load of climate protesters, they're chanting and they're at the back of the hall, but one has broken through and is running down behind you. It's not unreasonable, just because she's a white woman, middle-aged woman in a dress, that she's not a threat. It's reasonable to assume there might be something else that's about to happen, isn't it, in this day and age?
That's why I was bringing up Jo Cox earlier, which I think is really important to kind of focus on. But
why? No, sorry. Why is it important to focus on Jo Cox today?
Because we're all aware of this terrible thing that happened a couple of years ago, where a man suddenly appeared with a knife and killed such a brave, brilliant MP.
Yes, and why is that relevant?
It's relevant because everyone in the room was aware that these were Greenpeace activists. They are obviously very non-violent.
Now you say this. But actually, again, this perception that, well, if you're an activist, look, no doubt, of course, the murder of Jo Cox was a awful, terrible man motivated by terrible things. But there is this view, isn't there, that if it's something like Greenpeace, then these are cuddly, nice people, and they won't do anything wrong. We have seen an escalation in protests that might be seen as being peaceful by others, but to a certain extent, going into a building, yes, they're not carrying knives, they're not physically threatening people, they're not throwing things on people, absolutely. But the expectation that they might is now a reasonable expectation, given the milkshaking we've seen. Jokes about people throwing battery acid at Nigel Farage, for goodness sake, on the BBC. There is now a strong fear that protests are now getting out of hand, and whether they're by nice, cuddly people like Greenpeace, or indeed you may think yourselves about Extinction Rebellion. I don't think of Extinction Rebellion or Greenpeace as nice, cuddly organisations. I wouldn't see those protests in that way. Do you not think the people in that event might have been reasonable to assume there was a risk to them?
Yeah, OK, that's great that you brought this up. No, I don't. If any of them have been living on a different planet, possibly. But what was so important about the Extinction Rebellion is that we are strictly non-violent. So we've had 10 days of shutting down areas of London recently in April, and you would have thought that with the immediate amount of media coverage, if there was any violence perpetrated by us, that would have been on the front page, and there was none. We're using the word violence. We're talking about violence by a man. I mean, really extreme violence, in my opinion.
Extreme
if anyone
violence?
looked at the video, I think women who have suffered any kind of physical abuse.
Oh, for goodness sake!
We'll find that video very disturbing.
Well, I'm sorry, but if you're a woman and you're a man when you're protesting, shouldn't you expect to be treated the same way? Eleanor Banbury, I'll give you the final word. Is it the fact that it's a woman? Is that the specific issue? If it had been a man, no one would have said a word.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing that's present throughout all of this. And I think he has such a naive view that he's saying Greenpeace doesn't have any violence. Statistically, if you check all their members, I'm sure a good 2-3% will have. We can't take risks anymore in the climate we're in. And I think people need to praise him for people he's potentially protected instead of villainising him. And also really belittling people who have gone through abuse and liken it to that. That really is quite an insulting thing for people who have gone through that.
OK. Elena Banbury, Conservative activist. Jamie Kelsey-Fry, spokesman for Extinction Rebellion. Thank you very much indeed.
Let's talk to Paul in Derbyshire. Hello, Paul.
Morning, Mike.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Good. What do you want to say? Yeah, I just basically like to say we're living in dangerous times. We're sending the wrong message out here. In my opinion, we need any unplanned protest, no matter how peaceful it is. They need to understand that in the times we're currently living in, that we cannot take for granted that these people are going to peacefully. She could have had anything in that bag.
Well, also, like I was saying earlier, we are at sort of, DEFCON 5 when it comes to terror alerts. We're always being told that the terror sort of temperature for us at the moment is very high, right? So if we're at high alert, why is there not more protection for the Cabinet?
Well, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to get to the point where we're going to actually ask them for ID to see how serious the threat is.
Right.
I mean, it's getting silly. I mean, this woman could have had anything.
Exactly. And anyone who's been in that situation around something that's like that happening to a politician, you don't have a lot of time to think.
Oh, no. I mean, in hindsight, it looked like he was slightly heavy-handed. But you don't have time to... You have to react first, and then hindsight comes afterwards.
Yeah.
You can pick the bones out afterwards.
Right.
But ultimately, sometimes you just don't get a second chance. And, if she, God forbid, if she was carrying something in that bag and she'd have got to wherever she was going, there's no turning back then. By all means, it does look bad in a way.
Yeah.
But we need to send the message out that you can't just go into these... into these kind of things. The security, I don't know why the security...
I know,
mean,
I can't understand
I
don't understand what was going on there. But also, like I said, if this had happened in America and anyone got that close to the President of the United States or the Secretary of State, they'd be shot dead. Simple as that.
Well, I mean, I know we're living in times where, we probably are going towards the left and a bit softer, but we need to sort of find some common central ground, and I think that's being eroded away.
Yes.
And unfortunately... There's a lot of bad things happening, and these people need to understand that they're going to have to... People are going to deal with them as it happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's not free-for-all. You can't just go and lie down in the middle of the road whenever you like, glue yourself to buildings, glue yourself to trains. They need to be stopped, these people. If they want to be absolutely rabid maniacs and they want to be anarchists, that's fine. But they've got to give and they've got to take, and they've got to expect to be treated roughly from time to time. Paul, that's a great call. Thank you. Let's talk to Frankie, who's in East London. Hi, Frankie.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
Good, sir. What would you like to say?
Well, I've got to tell you, listen, I listened to that last night and watched it. I'll tell you what they're doing. They're getting a little bit too delicate with these people. Listen, Mike, I've had certain situations in the last couple of months. One in particular, I was just walking down the road after I parked my motor up, and I had an ex-parachute regiment badge I used to serve. I'd done 8 years. And it was parked in, it was in the front of my window.
Right.
Fella's gone past on my bike. He's tried to cut me up before I parked up, and he's called me a racist.
A racist?
He's lobbed a can of Coke at me,
right?
And he thought I was going to dodge it. I grabbed it, and then what happened was he's pulled up at the lights, and I've caught him.
Sounds like a thief from the Matrix.
Well, I'll tell you, I've never had to run far because he's only 10 feet away. He forgot the lights changed.
Right.
I've then took him out. I've literally clotheslined him, got him on the floor,
right,
rolled him over and pulled the Coke over his face, screaming like someone having a baby. You've never heard anything like it.
Right.
And
Did you not think that was a bit over the top, though?
Well, the thing is, he lobbed it. I mean, if I wouldn't have put my hands up, it would have hit me straight in the head.
Yeah, right. But I bet you the cops had turned up. Yeah, but if the cops had Frankie, if the cops had turned up, they would have arrested you, kneeling over somebody.
Straight away. The way he was drawing attention, to be honest with you, I was in such a bad frame of mind. I just thought that's the end of it. I couldn't care less. But what I'm trying to say is, when you're confronted with these situations with these people, and you've got to remember, Mike, they're not playing a fair game. They come at you. You don't know whether it's their nut, whether it's their foot, whether it's their knee. You don't know what they got.
No, that's true.
You just don't know.
And Mark Field didn't know what that woman was about, and he did the right thing, as far as I'm concerned, because you can't let something happen and then worry about it.
The right thing.
Yeah.
Instead of that, what they're doing, they're all leaving him like a rat's leaving a sinking ship now. They're all swerving him now like a bad smell. Even his own party, well, it just shows you all about their party anyway, doesn't it? I mean...
It really does. But also, more important, I mean, the big issue for me as well, Frankie, is where was the security? Why is there no security around senior members of our government? You know?
Exactly. All that money they got to spare and throw about having their dinners and all that game, all there really, and all that cobblers, they do not put people on the door that respect people's privacy. If they're going to have a little bit of a do and a gathering, then get some security.
You've got better security in the Shepherd's Bush Empire, mate. I'm telling you. Thank you very much indeed. Frankie in East London there, quite rightly saying that, you don't always have time to think when these people come at you. And this woman's coming at Mark Field, looking as if she's got a very strong intent to walk past his chair and get to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, one of the highest offices in the land, one of the most protected senior ministers in the Cabinet. Where on earth was the security? That's what I want to know. And if you're going to start asking for people's resignations, let's start at the top. Let's start with the head of the Metropolitan Police. Let's start with the Royal Protection Squad. Let's start with the people who are supposed to be defending those of our politicians who are running the country, because they failed in their duty, and because of that, Mark Field had to step in. And I bet you, for one, Philip Hammond's very happy that he did. Thanks very much for joining us. What's your view of all of this? Because it's become, like everything seems to become in this country now, a massive area for debate. You know, some people saying that Mark Field was heavy-handed, others saying that, you know, who knows what she was going to do. You know, what's your take on it?
Well, having seen the clip, I don't think he was heavy-handed, to be fair.
No. I mean, it does look a bit uncomfortable because it's a man sort of manhandling a woman, which never looks great. But, I mean, I don't know what else he was supposed to do.
That's right. I mean, I sort of go back to my police service, Mike, and trust me, women can be just as violent as men,
I'm sure,
if not more so. You know, and it's quite right. I mean, I just heard on the news clip there, you know, Peter Bottomley saying that women do attack people.
Yeah.
So you look at that clip, she's heading up towards the top table. You've got the Governor of Bank of England there. You've got, obviously, Philip Hammond, the Chancellor. You know, senior figures, and we've seen this over the last years. I mean, like the Euro elections, things being thrown at candidates.
Yeah.
Okay, admittedly, milkshake and so on. But
you don't know. Yeah, but you don't know it's a milkshake. I mean, as Nigel Farage said when it happened to him, I mean, he doesn't know what somebody's throwing at him, and your first instinct, if you had a gun, might be to pull it out and use it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always think back to the 2001 general election with John Prescott.
Yes.
When he got egged, and then he is an instinctive response to the person. I mean,
which everybody sort of cheered. It made him more popular than ever. Nobody said then, you know, he shouldn't have done it, did they?
No, and I think you know, as I said, I look at that clip. He's got hold of the woman and he's escorted her out.
Yeah.
Even if you want to have a protest, fair enough, have a protest. If they're at the bottom of the room that I've seen, and then they said, you know, here's our view, here's our concern, blah blah blah, and then left.
Yes. That's
fine. That's fine. There's your freedom of expression. You've made your point. But to be heading towards the top table, you don't know what this person's got, especially this day and age. You know, you look at the incidents we've had, the terrorist incidents and so on, sharply bladed instruments, a knife, you know, you just don't know. And I think he did, it's only my opinion, Mike, but I think he did the right thing.
Yeah, but your opinion's important, David, because you're a former counter-terrorism detective, and I want to ask you as well, what do you make of the fact that he even had to do it? Because surely to God, we should, at this point in time, have better protection of our senior cabinet ministers, like the Chancellor.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to look at the clip, and I just made the assumption there must have been some security there. I mean, it's hard to tell because you know, they would mostly blend in. You look at a lot of the males there with the black ties on. But I'm a bit surprised, really. You know, this at the moment, you look at the threat level that we're in, you look at how heated arguments are from Brexit to whatever it is, and how there's been an awful lot of violence, and it makes me uncomfortable, Mike, seeing this. I think, you know, we live in a democratic society. Let people have their say. That's fine. But let's not go into people's face and be vitriolic. I mean, some of the things we've seen, I mean, it was like that clip when the Trump supporter, when Donald Trump was here, they were right in his face. I mean, there's no need for that.
Well, they pushed another guy over, didn't they, as well? I mean, who was quite elderly. And, you know, again, I mean, there was less fuss about that than there is about this. Partly, I suppose, as well, we live in a society now where everything is recorded. So you do get to look at things, you know, outside of the frame of reference, if you like. It's a bit like watching, you know, the replay of a penalty in football, where, you know, at the time, if you're the referee, you give it, and then you realise the guy dived. You know, by then it's too late. The point is now everything is poured over on social media because we get to see it, and I think that doesn't help.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. And on the penalty bit, being an Everton supporter, I know we've suffered a little bit from it, you know.
Well, you got a great penalty taken, eh? You just get the goalkeeper to take it all, don't you?
That's right. I was absolutely delighted when I saw Jordan Pickford do that.
Yeah.
So I think with signing Leighton Baines as well, we'll be all right. But let's get back to Mark Field. I think he's used reasonable force, and that's the key phrase. Have you used reasonable force?
Yeah.
I don't think he's used excessive force. Quite rightly, he said, investigate me, and I think they'll look at it. And I would be very surprised, Mike, if they don't say, no, he used reasonable force. You don't know at that particular time. Put yourself in that situation. Here's a woman making quite an assertive move.
Yeah, and she was moving fast as well.
Yes. You know, it isn't like a stroll saying, you know, to Philip Hammond, whatever her views are, strolling up. It's a direct move, and I think it's an instinctive thing. I think he's done the right thing. Yeah. As I said, he's used reasonable force.
And I've got a tweet here which will interest you from Eagle, who says the table was full of knives. It's not that relevant that she was not carrying a weapon. He seized control and gained compliance. Well done, that man. And that's a good point, because, she may not have needed a knife. She could have just picked one up.
That's right. But let's go back. I mean, no doubt they'll review the security, what happened there, and maybe for future events like the Mansion House, where you've got high-profile politicians and other figures, they may have to review the security of these things, because it's, I'm all for have your say, please have your say, but do it responsibly and then leave.
But this is the trouble with protests, isn't it? Because you get people who you give them an inch, they take a mile. They start blocking roads, they start lying down, they start threatening to disrupt Heathrow Airport with drones. The less you punish them for doing what they do, the more encouraged they get to do more.
That's right.
And it's a two-way street at the end of the day. If you want to protest, I'm with you. I'm quite happy if you want to protest. But if you overstep the mark, you've got to expect to get roughed up every now and again.
That's right. We've got to get the balance right. Even in a protest in a public place, people also have the right to go about their business, and it's doing a compromise. You're there, you have your say. I mean, if we have marches, obviously London's always the place to go for marches, because you want to protest outside Parliament, etc. That's fine. They're normally arranged with the Commissioner of the Met. Or any other city with the Chief Constable. It's all arranged, the numbers, the route and everything else, and everyone's happy with that. Yeah. And you can have your march, have your protest. I'm not saying don't do it, but act responsibly. And this day and age, I think people think, I have a right to go into someone's face and tell them what I think. Well, no, you don't. No. You're in my personal space.
Exactly. And if you want to provoke somebody, don't be surprised if they get provoked. You know what I mean?
That's right, and respond.
Yeah.
But as I said, I look at Mark Phil, and I've looked at that video a couple of times, and I can't see anything other than reasonable force. I think I would have done the same thing, Mike, if I was sat
Well, let's hope that the police do not act as though we sometimes see them act, which is over the top, because it's the police's job, in my view, to stop the protesters from getting that close, rather than to investigate Mark Field and charge him with some kind of criminal offence.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do agree with you, Mike. Common sense needs to come in, and hopefully common sense will prevail on this issue.
Well, let's hope so. Dr. David Lowe, thank you very much indeed. Research fellow at Leeds Beckett Law School, former counter-terrorism detective, who doesn't think that Mark Field was over the top in the way that he reacted, who also thinks that he was entirely justified, and who also, like me, believes that if you want to protest, that does not give you the right to become aggressive, to get up into somebody's face, to get too close to them, where you might risk your own safety because somebody might take you down. And she's lucky, I think, that it was only Mark Field she has to put up with, and it wasn't, sort of an elbow in the face from some bouncer or some Secret Service nutter from America, because they'll shoot you. They'll shoot you dead, and then they'll ask questions later. Well, what do you make of this Mark Field scenario?
It's the same as everybody else, really. Well, anyone with any common sense. I don't know what sort of eviction etiquette she was expecting, because these people get blown off ribs in the middle of the sea by water cannons.
Yes.
So what was she expecting? She could have been a radicalised member of the bloody Joe Brand, all-you-can-eat-for-a-pound militant, acid-throwing comedy feminist movement. But,
I didn't realise they had an official club, but it's a good name for it.
They may do, but if they don't, I was only joking, Joe.
Of course, absolutely right. You'll never get on heresy with views like that, though.
Absolutely not, no. It's too common. No, I just agree with everything everyone else has been saying, really. It's general consensus that, hopefully common sense will rise, and Theresa may even listen.
Well, at least, the one thing you can say is that he's been suspended rather than fired. So that at least suggests that they're not going to do anything really stupid and radical and get rid of the guy.
Yeah, but once you do these ridiculous things, it kind of reinforces the sort of lefty liberalised sort of lunacy of everything at the moment. So, what if a child's been beaten or been dragged into a car? Should you not intervene just in case you accidentally damage the person's wrist or scratch the car?
Well, do you know what's going to happen next, Alan, is you're going to get these maniacs deciding, I'll get a minister fired. And then you sort of go running at them to see whether or not you can get yourself assaulted. And then you get rid of another Tory.
This goes back into the Nigel Farage thing,
Yeah.
Everyone laughed at him for having a milkshake thrown, which could have been a cup of acid.
Yeah, it could have been. Even if it was hot coffee, Alan, that can do you an awful lot of harm.
Yes. So it seems to be one rule for the let's call it the left, and one rule for everybody else, let's call it the Nazis. But I don't know.
It's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. Alan, thanks for your call. Let's talk to Akin, who's in Liverpool. Hello, Akin.
Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, just a couple of points.
Yeah.
One is that woman, grabbing that woman by the neck, right? If she'd have had anything on her, the first thing you'd have done is grabbed her hands. If she'd have had anything on her at all, grabbing her by the neck would be futile. We'd either be in a hospital or on slab. And the reason I say that is because he didn't go for her hands, because he knows it was a woman. He knows she didn't have anything. He just bullied it out of the room.
Well, what would you have done? Let her walk past then?
No, I wouldn't. That's not the point I'm making, though, isn't it?
Well, no, you can't separate the two, Akin. If you were there, what would you have done if you were him?
Well, you're saying she could have had this, she could have had that.
Well, she could have picked up a knife. She could have picked up a knife off the table.
Well, yes, she could have, yeah.
Yeah, there's any number of things. But if you're in a situation which is a heat-of-the-moment situation, at the moment when MPs and politicians are very much under threat, and people are saying, oh, she's walking very quickly and quite deliberately towards the Chancellor of the Exchequer, OK? This guy prevents her from getting there, and he may have been clumsy in what he did and how he did it, but, I mean, when you're in that moment, you're not thinking really about how you're going to grab the person. You're just going to try and stop them.
Well, what you do is, if that's the case, you just take a person down. You don't keep them up.
Well, what do you think? That would have looked worse, wouldn't it?
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't look worse if you take a person down. You take them down with the intention of then being able to take them out and everyone's safe. That's the first thing you do. Not grab them by the neck and lead them out by the neck. That's neither safe for you or anybody else around.
It may not be something that he's particularly trained in doing. I think his point was to stop her from getting to where she wanted to go because he didn't think that was going to be a good idea.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. But the point I make is this. He knew she wasn't carrying anything.
Well, he didn't know that. That's not. You can't say that.
He bullied it out.
No, you can't say that. You cannot say that. And also, by the way, she put herself in that situation. She is a protester. She didn't have to be there. She didn't have to be aggressive, and she didn't have to be marching towards the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Okay.
That was her choice.
That's true. That's true. But still being under licence, I'm a close protection officer, right? But let me just say this to you. If someone is attacking someone, the first thing you do is you either take them to the ground, as you would, right?
No, listen, I'm not disagreeing with you.
Or they look for the extremities for carrying something, not to grab them by the neck, which is futile.
Yeah.
Now, at the point which he had taken this woman, at that point, he obviously at some point, now knew she wasn't carrying anything, right? So he didn't need to carry on with the way.
Well, here's another scenario for you, Akin. Surely the point about what happened last night is that if he was able to stop her, but she was able to get as far as she got, surely there should have been security then that would come in and take over. But there didn't appear to be.
I 100% agree with you. And being a speech CPO, I say, to protect the principle is your priority. Yeah. And I get that, right? But what I'm saying is, the point I'm making is, which I just want you to try and understand is, at some point, he knew she wasn't carrying anything. And when he grabbed her, if she was carrying anything, then it would have been futile because he'd been...
Yeah, but he doesn't know that because he doesn't do what you do for a living, Akin. He's a politician. So at the end of the day, your argument is all very well, but he should never have been put in that situation by his own security and by the security around the government. And if that is the state of the security around the government, then God help us. Richard is in Grantham. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Mike.
How you doing?
Thanks for allowing me on. I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. What do you want to tell me?
Well, the Mark Field debate that's going on at the moment, I think the Mark Field, what he needs to apologise for is to apologise that he was put in that situation in the first place.
Yes.
Now, I head up security at a very big hotel chain.
Okay.
And we've hosted events like this. We've hosted ministers, prime ministers. We've hosted all sorts of dignitaries and what have you. And the preparation beforehand, I mean, it's almost like preparing for the D-Day landing.
Yeah, right.
They go through fine-tooth detail who's going to do what and where. And I didn't see anybody there that would come close to matching the sort of preparations that I've been embedded in when one of our hotels has been a venue for these types of.
Well, I find it extraordinary that given that we're always being told that the terror threat is at the minimum high, that there isn't a massive amount of security around any event that cabinet ministers are attending.
It is. Well, from what I can see, I mean, the incident in question, I mean, I think he did use reasonable force, first of all, because what we saw was the protesters at the back, and I do believe Greenpeace are sincere, that they are peaceful protesters, and that was a peaceful, if not loud protest.
Yeah.
Which, for whatever reason, that may have been allowed by the security operation to allow them to protest. But what we saw was one of the protesters break away and move at pace towards the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Governor of Bank of England. And my question is, what would you do?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was what I asked that guy, the guy who called in earlier from Liverpool, Akin, I think his name was. He said that he should have taken her to the ground. But if he'd done that, then that would have been even worse, wouldn't it? Well, no, actually, that actually would be the wrong thing to do. Right. What Field actually did was effectively a citizen's arrest. Yeah. And yes, he used the force necessary to remove her, considering that she was moving at pace. She was putting some energy into her approach towards I mean, she was not slowly ambling towards him. I mean, she was walking very deliberately and very quickly. Precisely. And I think, again, just going back to security operations, I think of course, the Metropolitan Police would be involved, as I've been involved with them, all over the country, not just in London, with counter-terrorism and all the rest of it, because the security level is severe. It's not, it is still the second highest level that we're at. It's just, we could become very complacent to it because it's been there so long. But also, the day-to-day policing here is quite fragmented. Because it was at the Mansion House, it's the City of London Police that will be doing the day-to-day policing. Yes. And now I'm speculating here, of course, but I think there may have been some kind of confusion, maybe, over who was going to police which aspects of the event. Right. So the Metropolitan Police may have believed that the City of London Police will be doing one part and vice versa. So that's a bit worrying, isn't it, if that's true?
I think it is, again, pure speculation from what I've seen on the video, but I suspect there was some kind of confusion in the security preparations between the two separate police forces. Right.
And what do you make of... I mean, I think it's all a bit just craven, this kind of political point scoring that everybody does now when anything happens. And predictably, people like Owen Jones on the left, who wants women to be treated the same as men, is trying to start a petition to get this guy sacked because he attacked a woman. Why is it different? I mean, it wouldn't be any different. If he had done it to a man, presumably there'd have been no big deal.
Well, I look at it another way. If this was a meeting of the local horticultural society and a similar protest was being made, we would be hearing this sort of hullabaloo. The splits in opinion have been very partisan. Yes. I think the non-political views are all saying, no, this is a guy that was protecting not just the Chancellor of the Exchequer of the United Kingdom, but also probably a personal friend as well. And he didn't want to see that person getting roughed up. And who knows what she had in her hand. She may have been in the auspices of Greenpeace, but could have been...
Yeah, I mean, all these people who are on Twitter saying, oh, yeah, you can't tell the difference between a terrorist and a woman in a red dress. Well, hello, terrorists can turn up as a woman in a red dress. That's the point.